Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Michelle Vandepass, and I want to ask you if you're spiritually perplexed. Many of us are. And my guest today, Paul Rademacher, is here. His book is Spiritual Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe. This is a really cool book. It is travel tips for the spiritually perplexed. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you, Michelle. It's great to be with you.
Now, what is spiritually perplexed? What does that mean? I feel that I am it, but tell me in case I'm so perplexed I don't know.
Well, I think there are several aspects to that perplexing part of the book. Number one is that many people have been brought up in a traditional religion and tend to think in terms of dogma and religion for connecting with the spiritual domain. I have a different view on that. I really think that what Jesus was talking about, for instance, when he was talking about the kingdom of heaven, was not so much an after-death reality, but something that is available to ordinary people in the present moment. And that is the shift in awareness that can happen to us, or the shift in consciousness that can happen to us as ordinary human beings. And so what I'm trying to do in the book is to shift the focus away from this preoccupation of what's going to happen to us after we die. Of course, you've got two options, going to heaven or hell. And move it away from that conversation to something that is much more available to us in the present time. And when Jesus would talk about the kingdom of heaven, he would often use terms that were connected to the present. So that's one aspect of the perplexing part of it. But the other one that I think is just as important is that in the Western societies, we've been brought up in cultures that are dominated by the scientific worldview. And that means that the only things that are available to us and the only things that are appropriate for investigation are what we can take in from the five physical senses. But what I'm trying to put forth in the book is that there is much more that is available to us beyond the five physical senses and also beyond the physical world. Domains that have been described by saints and shamans and mystics from the beginning of time, that because we haven't been educated into them in our society, we tend to think that they don't exist, but in fact they do.
So much ground to cover already. So do you believe in heaven and hell? There could be some aspect of hell after we die based on our belief system now? Is that what I hear you saying?
Yeah, I think that people, whatever their expectation might be for what they think is going to happen after they die, can be something that they can encounter, but I don't think it's a permanent reality at all. Very often when people move to the other side, various things can happen. For instance, one of the things that can happen is that they may not realize that they have died at all and think that they're still living in the physical world. Another thing that can happen is that they can kind of get lost, or another thing that can happen is that they get attracted to whatever belief system they had when they died, and because that's their expectation. But what happens in that particular case, for a lot of people, is they either get bored with it or they get distracted into something else and move on to other experiences.
So you can get bored in the afterlife?
Well, I mean, I think you can get bored with your belief about the afterlife. I think that there's so much to explore that there's no way that you could ever begin to take it in. So it's kind of a cornucopia of opportunities for you.
Opportunities, I love that word. You talk about the difference between eternity and infinity, and that we're all so preoccupied, and the churches are preoccupied with what happens after we die. I mean, that's sort of the big question, isn't it? How does eternity and infinity work into this? What is the difference?
Well, eternity is this question of what's going to happen to us when we die. We've been told that whatever destination we go to, that it's going to last for a very, 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 very long time, and so that's why we call it eternity.
Right.
Infinity, on the other hand, is a different category altogether. I got that the term itself from Carlos Castaneda's work with Don Juan, and in that work, Don Juan is saying that this issue of infinity is the question and the most important thing that human beings have to deal with. And infinity is this opportunity that we have as human beings to move beyond the physical world and to engage this physical world with a different mentality or a different awareness entirely. And it's sort of that in-between state. We often We think of the only two options that we have are either you're awake or you are asleep. But if you've done any kind of meditation at all, or if you've been paying attention when you wake up in the morning, there's an in-between state, for instance, where your body is deeply, deeply relaxed, and yet you're still very much aware. And it's that in-between state that is the doorway that people can go through to begin to experience these other ranges of awareness that are not as exotic as what we think, because I think they're a natural part of our existence. We just tend to ignore them, or we are unconscious of them when they occur.
So this in-between state that you're talking about, how do I know that's not just my imagination or some reality that I hope is true?
That's a question that we encounter all the time in the work that we do at the Monroe Institute, because people will start to have these experiences, and that's one of the first things that they'll ask, how do I know this is not my imagination? Well, one of the ways is through gradual experience. The more you move into these, the more you begin to realize that they take on a life of their own. And if you have an experience where it is so far beyond your imagination that you say to yourself, I couldn't have thought of that, I couldn't have made that up if I tried, then you have some sense that there's a reality to this. But there are other ways as well. For instance, two people sometimes can go into these states and have a common experience, and they can come back and they can talk about those experiences. They can even talk about how they interacted with one another. Another way is that you might gain some information that you can later verify, information that you couldn't have gotten any other way. As an example, we had a guy come through who went to this bar quite often, but he'd never seen what the bar looked like from the side of the bartender. But he got a view of it in this experience, and then he was able to go back home and look from that perspective, and indeed it was what he had seen in his vision. Another way is that if you do this enough, after a while you can begin to see that there is sort of a genius that is putting the whole thing together. In the work that we do at the Monroe Institute, we encourage people to keep a journal, and because these are like little pieces of a puzzle, and you can tell that over time that when these pieces start to come together, that it forms a mosaic. So you know that these are just not random things that are happening, but there is a much deeper genius that is occurring. An additional way is you can encounter maybe a loved one or someone you've known in this life who's passed on to the other side, and they can also give you information that you might not have acquired in any other way.
Wow, it's a fascinating book, and it is, I'm going to show it here one more time, Spiritual Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe, and of course you can find that on spiritualhitchhiker.com.